It is a great time to be a Shanks fanboy. Absolutely it is.
Oh yeah.
Shanks is doing great things in the manga. Shanks is doing, as far as I understand, great things in the film Red movie. No spoilers, please God, no spoilers. I will smite you in the comment section if you do. And of course, Shanks doing great things in the anime.
赤髪はどこにいる？
消息不明だ。
厄介な存在になってきた。
Correctamundo. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Right on the anime, we have a Film Red special episode, or I guess 2. And one that aired recently was episode 1029. And in this episode, there is an eye catcher of the red hair wonder Shanks. And this new eye catcher actually reveals Shanks' bounty when Shanks was in the East Blue. Shanks back then, 12 years ago, had a bounty of 1,040,000,000 in the East Blue. Oh, so, because this is the era of Shanksa, and Oda's going full steam ahead, even doing interviews in Shanks' Hawaiian pants, we must follow suit, and any new news that involves Shanks must be covered. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's our time now. Now, what does this mean for the history of One Piece? First of all, the mountain bandit Higuma. Diffed. Massively diffed when Shanks arrived by a 1,032,000,000 berry gap. Yeah.
Get some help.
Obviously, Shanks had no reason to care at all about a lowly 8 million berry man. 1 million seconds is a few days. 1 billion seconds over 30 years. That is the gap we're talking about here. This man was even Shanks' scope. It was like a lion versus an earthworm. That is the gap. That is the difference between Shanks and Higuma. So that's the first thing. It is pretty funny finding out that the berry gap between those two was that high, especially when Higuma was flaunting his bounty. He was flaunting 8 million in front of a 1 billion plus man. That is that is hysterical. That is literally the first iteration of Buggy flaunting his bounty in front of someone like Katakuri. Of course, this also confirms that Shanks is 1,000,000% confirmed stronger now than he was back then. There are some Shanks detractors that do use that argument of, well, Shanks lost an arm, therefore he's actually weaker. He's actually stronger back then than he is now. Madness. Absolute lunacy, and that is crushed, confirmed in real time. So stop that madness, we're done with that. Number 2, though, is far more likely, and it's going back to Katakuri. Shanks' bounty is comparable to Katakuri's bounty. In fact, it's comparable to a lot of Yonko Commander bounties. Therefore, even though bounty and strength are a 1-to-1 comparison, you could argue easily that around this point in time, Shanks was somewhere in that range of power, like a Marco or a King or a Katakuri or a Queen or a Cracker or a Smoothie or a Jack. And what's also important here too is this means, very, very likely means, that around this point in time, 12 years ago, Mihawk, his bounty, when he was an active pirate, was probably around that range, and his strength was comparable to that of a Yonko commander at that point in time. I think it's a very likely bet here, because of course we do have these daily duels between Shanks and Mihawk before Shanks goes to the East Blue. It's only when he comes back from East Blue, after Shanks lost his arm, that's when Mihawk lost interest in Shanks. Because we now know, based on the Odin flashback, that the arm that Shanks lost was his dominant arm, because we see back then him wielding a sword with that very arm that he lost. So Shanks, of course, given that fact, could no longer practice his swordsmanship in the same vein. That being said, in the past, these daily duels were the stuff of legend. And you can understand why, because a Yonko commander having a daily fight with another Yonko commander, oh yeah, that is going to be the talk of the town without a doubt. Whether it's going to be, let's say, Katakuri versus Marco, or King versus Smoothie, or Queen versus Cracker, or Jet, you name it. Whatever island they're going to be fighting on, get the stands ready, concessions, popcorn, drinks, beer, you name it, because we have a main event fight going down here between two Yonko commander individuals. That is the comparison here. And that would definitely spread across the world. Now, some folks would say, well, what? Like, who would actually care if Queen fought against Cracker daily? No, people would care. That's a big deal. People forget that someone like Marco, even though he's still a commander of Whitebeard, he was still specifically noted to being a good option to taking down Blackbeard and company by the Gorosei themselves before the Payback War. Marco was a solid candidate to be like a next Yonko in, let's say, the Gorosei's minds. Katakuri, we can see during Whole Cake Island, was like running the show when Big Mom was going crazy, having her hunger pangs. Katakuri locked down. One Yonko commander, Jack the Drow, and his men, we seen how they ravaged an entire country of a very strong race of people, the Mink. We see how much pull Queen has with the entire Beast Pirate crew, as well as King the Wildfire, when he regulates and commands the Flying Six. So, ultimately speaking here, yes, that matters. That matters a significant amount when it comes to commanders having these daily fights, yes. Now, at this point in time, too, another thing here, Shanks was 27 years old. And in my personal opinion, I do view Shanks as essentially Roger 2.0. Every era has its king. And personally, I would argue that Shanks is the current era's king. So I think it's very likely that when Roger was also in his 20s, he probably had a bounty around this bounty of 1 billion, 40 million, some odd. Yes. Of course, nowhere near confirmed, just my speculation, but I think it's very likely that Roger had a bounty that was similar around that point in time. And then, of course, Luffy is the 3.0 version of Roger. But keep in mind here that Roger's voyage was significantly longer than Shanks' voyage, and currently much, much longer than Luffy's voyage. Even though he had a bounty maybe around that range, he had more time to kind of build up his bounty over the course of time. Meaning that if Roger had, at one point in time, a 4 billion plus berry bounty like what Shanks has now, he might have been older, let's say in his 40s, compared to Shanks now who's in his 30s. But his era wasn't like the Great Pirate era, therefore you'd argue harder to get a higher bounty. So actually you can argue that he had a lower bounty than Shanks at that age, because Shanks' rise came during the Great Pirate era. Now after this, we have the Gomu Gomu no Mi fruit. And this one, obviously Shanks being that powerful, he rose up on Who's Who and Cypher Pole, and at that point in time, Who's Who was able to be a genius just like Rob Lucci was. So you can argue that he was comparable to, let's say, a younger Rob Lucci, or let's say a current Rob Lucci, potentially. We're not too sure. But I'll lean more towards a younger Rob Lucci to kind of be on the safe side here. But that being said, Shanks being that high of a bounty kind of does give a little more credence to Shanks actually knowing what was going on with the Gomu Gomu fruit itself, where it was actually unique ability. Because Shanks is a very powerful person in the world itself. And being that powerful just by default would mean that you can gain a lot of insight in these particular things about the world. And of course, obviously his time with the Roger Pirates also indicate that he does know something about the Gomu Gomu being the Nika ability. So it's not necessarily a direct thing, like not at all. It's actually a very, very loose thing, but you could argue that because he has, again, a 1 billion plus berry bounty, he must have very high standing in the world of One Piece itself. Therefore, he has a lot of insight on certain things, which of course in this case would be him knowing the truth about the Gomu Gomu. But very clear here, very, very clear here, we still do not know if Shanks fully knew that the Gomu Gomu's awakening would be the Nika. We still do not know that. That is still not confirmed. Not even close to being confirmed. So let's wait and see in the future what Oda does with that. But what he did likely know is Haki. Shanks did likely have both observation and armament Haki at that point in time, which of course does bring up the issue of the Lord of the Coast. It does. Like, wait, hold on. Okay. The man had armament Haki, very likely, and observation Haki. So how is it that the Lord of the Coast can just eat Shanks' arm the way it did in chapter 1? It's a bit strange. And because it's so strange, very obviously strange, I think it is likely, even though I troll about it from time to time, I think it is possible that Oda in the future will somewhat tweak, retcon that moment where the Lord of the Coast ate Shanks' arm. Like, for example, let's say that Shanks did himself rip off his own arm and gave it to the Sea King. No. But let's say it was more of a willing thing where he willingly gave his arm to the Sea King at that point in time for whatever particular reason, okay? Because otherwise, why didn't Shanks utilize arm and Haki? Things get a little more complicated, but it's very likely that Shanks didn't know Haki. There's a chance here, where even though he knew Haki, he wasn't good at actually using Haki. That's possible. Because we have seen commanders, like for example Jack, or Smoothie, or even Queen, they have Haki, but very sparingly. In particular Jack, where Jack, I don't think used Haki a single time. I think it's because of the data books specifically that we know that he has Haki, but he actually never used arm and Haki a single time. So maybe Shanks was a good using Haki at that point in time. Who knows? So again, things are a bit questionable there, obviously. That's what I'm saying. Again, this could be a tweak in the future to make that whole thing make more sense. And then, lastly for Haki, would be the Conqueror's Haki. It is now likely that Shanks had Conqueror's Haki before going into the East Blue. But it's still very, 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 very possible that Shanks awakened his Conqueror's Haki after his arm got ripped off by the Lord of the Coast and actually psyched it out. Because the same way he psyched out the Sea King was the same way Motobaro was psyched out by Luffy before Shibuya Archipelago, and that is the first time in the story that Luffy actually used Conqueror's Haki. And that is it. So these are the things I can gander when it comes to the Red Hair Wonder, now knowing that his bounty going into the East Blue was over 1 billion. He was a Yonko commander about to pull the East Blue Gauntlet and just straight up slaughter. As expected of the man who currently sits at the top. Yes!